evil Oromo regime of Ethiopia and its TPLF makers are attempting to steal the attention of the public from the Tigray Genocide and shrug off responsibility and pin poor performance and decision-making on other issues like the Orthodox Church row. The Fascist Oromo regime of Ethiopia warned on Wednesday that efforts by UN-backed investigators to probe abuses committed during the war in the country's north could undermine the progress of a peace agreement signed last year. The Fascist Oromo regime of Ethiopia and its evil makers, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, inked a peace deal in South Africa in November to end the 2-year Tigray War, which has killed untold numbers of people and unleashed a humanitarian crisis. In its first report published in September last year, the UN-backed International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia said it had found evidence of violations by all sides that could amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Ethiopia's government rejected the report and has embarked on a diplomatic offensive to win international support for its bid to stop the commission from continuing its work. On Wednesday, Ethiopia's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen said the commission would undermine the EU-led peace process and the implementation of the Pretoria Peace Agreement with inflammatory rhetoric, referring to the African Union, which mediated the negotiations. It could also undermine the efforts of national institutions, he told an AU ministerial session ahead of the Pan-African Bloc Summit in Addis Ababa this weekend. The Foreign Ministry said on Twitter, the 3-member commission, which was created by the UN Human Rights Council, has urged the Ethiopian government, its ally Eritrea and the TPLF to investigate and bring all perpetrators of abuses to justice. Atrocities. At a rare press conference last week, Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki said allegations of rights abuses by his forces in Ethiopia's Tigray region amounted to fantasy. This is a fantasy in the minds of those who are in this factory. I call a factory of fabricating misinformation, Isaias said during a visit to Kenya, reflecting questions about the presence of Eritrean troops in Ethiopia. Eritrea's army supported Ethiopian forces during the war and has been accused by the United States and rights groups of some of the conflict's worst atrocities. Asmara was not a party to the peace agreement and its troops remain in parts of Tigray, according to residents who accused the soldiers of murder, rape, and looting. Under the terms of the peace deal, the TPLF agreed to disarm in return for the restoration of access to Tigray, which was largely cut off from the outside world during the war. According to the BBC, Eritrean soldiers are accused of rape despite peace deal. During the 2-year conflict in northern Ethiopia, the systematic rape of Tigrayan women by Ethiopian soldiers, as well as their allies from neighboring Eritrea and militia groups, has been documented by the United Nations, human rights organizations, and journalists. There was hope that after the peace agreement was signed in November, the assaults on civilians would stop. Women, health workers, and aid organizations have told the BBC that they did not. I spoke to Lidi on a crackly phone line. Journalists are not being given government permission to travel to Tigray. It happened to me twice. What have I done wrong? It seemed like I wished for it. Lidi says she had been raped before, in January 2021, by 2 Eritrean soldiers. A third one refused. The 2 of them did what they wanted before asking the third one to do the same, except he said no. He said, "What will I do with her? She is already a corpse lying around." After the first time she was raped, Lidi sought medical and psychological help, joining a women's support group for survivors. On the day of the peace deal, Lidi had rushed out to help a young girl who had also been raped before she was assaulted too.
It is difficult to know the true number of sexual assaults committed during the war. Victims are often scared to speak out while telecommunications had been cut off during the fighting. According to data from the official Tigray Health Bureau in November and December 2022, After the peace deal was signed, 852 cases were reported in centers set up to help survivors. Human rights workers and aid organizations operating in Tigray have also continued to document cases of sexual violence. Sexual violence is a violation of the agreement, says Letitia Bader, Horn of Africa director at Human Rights Watch. One of the issues we have been raising is the importance of the backers of the agreement to ensure that they are speaking out when there are violations. The organization continues to call for independent investigators and journalists to gain access to northern Ethiopia, are very concerned by the efforts of the Ethiopian government to try to end and undermine the work of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts of Ethiopia, which was established by the Human Rights Commission in Geneva, she adds. Ms. Bader says investigations will be crucial if survivors are to get justice and for any reconciliation process. I never expected to be assaulted after the peace agreement, says Helena. The mother of 3 had already fled her home in Humra to the town of Shireo, where she worked as a street vendor selling maize. She says on November 16th, she was late going home when 2 Eritrean troops stopped her for breaking the curfew. She told them she had no ID, and they took her to an empty house. Helena says she was raped the whole night before they let her go in the morning. She has since had an abortion, saying she would rather die than give birth to a child from rape. According to aid workers the BBC spoke to, there are Eritrean troops close to Shirero. Peace deal requires them to leave Tigray, and though they have pulled out of major cities and towns, they maintain a presence in areas close to their border with Tigray. Shashu, an 80-year-old woman, cannot hold back her tears as we speak to her, again on a crackly phone line. We ask if she wants to continue with the interview and she agrees. Like Lete, Shashu says she has been raped twice in this war, before and after the peace deal. She says men assaulted her so badly in November that she now cannot control her urine and stool. 3 people on 1 human, I was completely traumatized. It's as if there is nothing good on my body anymore. Access to the region of 6 million people remains restricted, and it is impossible to verify independently the situation on the ground. Genocidal war erupted on November 4th, 2020 after war criminal Oromo Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, sent his Oromo, Eritrean, Amhara, Somali, Emirati, Iranian, Turkish armies into Tigray.
Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you very much, Natasha.
Evelina, I know it's graphic, but describe to us what is happening to women and girls in the Tigray region of Ethiopia.
Sure. Of course, recent months have seen a lot of evidence coming from the region, shedding light on the dire situation of Tigrayans in Ethiopia. And of course, we've seen evidence of mass killings. We've seen evidence of torture, abductions, and many other atrocities. But of course, this evidence was followed also by evidence of the use of rape and sexual violence against Tigrayan women. And at the end of January 2021, we've seen evidence from the UN Special Representative on sexual violence in the conflict, Pramila Patten, reporting on the serious allegations of sexual violence in Tigray, including a high number of alleged rapes in the capital of Mekelle. But subsequently, of course, the more and more evidence emerged. And of course, this brings us to this new report produced by Amnesty International and published only a few days ago that adds to the evidence. It concludes that sexual violence in the context of the conflict has been accompanied by a shocking level of brutality, including beatings, death threats, and ethnic slurs. And it is often accompanied by threats and by additional acts of physical and psychological torture. And as one of the Tigrayan women who testified reported, they raped me one after the other. I don't know if they realized I was pregnant. I don't know if they realized I was a person. Some of the abused women and girls were held in sexual slavery for several weeks. And as Amnesty International concludes, the patterns of sexual violence emerging from survivors indicate that the violations have been a part of a strategy to terrorize, degrade, and humiliate both the victims and the ethnic group. And of course, we already mentioned that of course, there are so many perpetrators involved in the atrocities. And it's very important to emphasize that Amnesty International classified the atrocities as crimes against humanity or war crimes. But we cannot forget that these atrocities can also amount to genocide. They could be genocidal methods to bring about the destruction of the community. So this is yet another element that needs to be
Absolutely, and forgive me for jumping in, but you did mention this issue of genocide and ethnic cleansing to a certain degree, I believe. So I just want to quote something that the Prime Minister of Ethiopia has mentioned, which is referencing the Tigray people as a cancer and wanting them wiped out. So, as succinctly as you possibly can.
Latest barrage came in an Amharic tweet this week. He characterizes the Tigrayans as weeds. We will work to remove the weed, but while removing the weed, we will try our best not to damage the wheat. Many observers have characterized his comment as dehumanizing. In the same statement, he also called the Tigrayans a cancer and a devil. His opponents accuse Ahmed of committing genocide.
አሁን ያለው ውጊያ ግን ተቀይሯል። አሁን ያለው ውጊያ የትኛው መንደር ወታደር ሲሄድ ምንም ጠላት አያይም፣ ህዝብ ነው የሚያየው። እዛ የገባው ወታደር ቁጥሩ ያነሰ ከሆነ በአህዱ ውስንነት ያነሰ ከሆነ ምንም ጠላት የለም ብሎ አልፎ ሳይጨርስ ከጀርባው በርከት ያሉ ሰዎች ወረውት በክላሽም በገጀራም ይጨፈጨፉታል። ለምሳሌ አንድ መንደር የገጠመን ወታደሩ ሲሄድ ጁንታው ሰው ይገላል፣ ይረሽናል። አልደገፉኝ የሚላቸውን ሰዎች ከቤተሰብ አውጥቶ ህዝብ እያየ ይረሽናል። እየረሸኑን ነው ጥበቃ አታደርጉልንም ብለው ጠየቁ ወታደሩን። ወታደሩ እንደምታውቁት ለምሳሌ 50 ሺህ ወይ 100 ሺህ እንኳን ቢሆን ትግራይ ያለው ወታደር ዝም ብሎ 20 ሺህ መቀሌ 20 ሺህ አዲግራት ካልተቀመጠ በስተቀር ሁሉን ተራሮች የሚያካልል ከሆነ የግድ 150 200 ካልሆነ በስተቀር አይቻልም። ተበጣጥሶ የሚንቀሳቀሰው እና በዛ መንደር ጠብቁን መተው ይገሉናል ብለው መከላከያን ሲጠይቁ መከላከያ አምኖ ተቀበላቸውና የተወሰነ ሰው በቁጥር ከ20 ብዛም የማይበልጡ ሰዎች አስቀምጦ አሰሳውን ቀጠለ። ጠዋት ጠብቁን እንዳትሄዱብን ያሉ ሰዎች ከሰዓት እነዚያን ጥቂት ሰዎች በብዛት ወጥተው ፈጇቸው። ይሄ ጉዳይ ኢንሲደንት ሲሆን ችግር የለውም። አንዳንዱ ተሲያጋጥም ገምግሞ ይስተካከላል። በኋላ ግን እንደ ባህል ስለሆነ በተለይ መቀሌ ላይ
For the past few months, what I really want to talk to you all about is what he said in regards to the reports of rape and sexual violence being used as a weapon of war in the conflict. Here's a short clip from his address in response to a question about these rapes.
ሰብአዊ መብት ጥሰት የሚሰቃዩ ትግራይ ስላለው ችግር የሚሰቃዩ ሰዎች የሰሜን ዕዝ ጥቃት በሚመለከት ምንም አያነሱ። ሰሜን ዕዝ እንኳን ተጠቃም ተዋረደ። ሴቶች እኮ አሁን በወንድ የተደፈሩት የኛ ወታደሮች ግን በሳንጃ ተደፍረዋል።
For those of you who can't speak Amharic, he basically said, while their women might have been raped, our soldiers were stabbed with daggers. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the most disgusting things I've seen a head of state say in my lifetime. I may only be in my early 20s, but Jesus Christ, he basically just equated the mass rape of thousands of women who have nothing to do with the warring parties involved who are actually, fighting this conflict. He compared their rape to the killing of soldiers who sign up to die. I'm sorry, I have respect for all those who decide to go into military service. But as a soldier, you are accepting the real possibility that you will be killed in combat. So to compare this rampant sexual violence against the Tigrayan women, to compare that to killing soldiers who sign up to die in combat is just mind-blowing.
Explain to us, what is this tension between the Amharans and the larger Ethiopian population and the Tigray? Why this battle is taking place?
Of course, this has been an ongoing issue, and unfortunately, as you mentioned correctly, the Tigrayan people are being portrayed as cancer, as something that needs to be destroyed. And unfortunately, this is a narrative that has been used before genocides took place. So this narrative is very concerning, and a number of researchers and people observing the situation raise this as a very important element and something that we should watch and monitor and of course act upon. But just wanted to also mention, of course, we know that the atrocities and the recent conflict started in November last year, but ultimately, even before, we've seen elements and we've seen indicators that something bad is going to happen and mass atrocities are going to happen. And among others, in August 2020, Genocide Watch issued a genocide warning for Ethiopia because of the government's inaction to stop ethnically motivated violence between Oromo, Amhara, Tigray, and other communities. And also in October 2020, Simon Scott's Center for the Prevention of Genocide warned also about the high risk of further atrocities. So this is an ongoing issue. This is nothing new. So we should be able, we as the international community, we should be able to react, to address these atrocities. However, we've seen inaction, and that's the reason we are in this place right now, seeing those atrocities happening and hearing yet another call to towards violence, called to destroy the communities, the Tigrayans in Ethiopia.
You've mentioned the international community, so let me talk to you about that. And it's very odd, speaking to you on a day where the world is talking about Haiti and that tragic earthquake that's taken place that's probably stolen many, many lives, and the horrifying situation we're seeing unfold in Afghanistan. Nobody, aside from us right now, is talking about what's happening in Ethiopia. Why? Why is the world not paying attention to Ethiopia?
Unfortunately, this is something that we observed in relation to a number of African countries where mass atrocities are happening today. Another example is Nigeria. And again, atrocities are happening on a regular basis. Killings are happening on a daily basis. Unfortunately, there is no enough attention on those countries. So we need to bring those important stories to the surface. And you've been reporting on those important topics on a regular basis. And of course, everyone working on the topic is very grateful. But unfortunately, not many reporters are engaged on those topics. So we need more attention. We need more journalists reporting on those important topics, shedding light on what is happening in countries such as Ethiopia, to the people as people of Tigray, but also in Nigeria and other countries. We cannot forget about those situations.
I want to return to the situation about the women, which was our entry point into this conversation. Is any sort of support or aid or any relief coming to them if women's bodies are being used as part of the battleground to engage in this war?
Yes, there is some assistance that is being provided to the women and also to the people in Tigray. But unfortunately, as we know, humanitarian access to Tigray is very much limited and blocked on a number of occasions. And also because of the internet shutdowns that occur in the region, we also don't necessarily have the first-hand information on a regular basis to know what is happening in the region and how the situation is deteriorating. And the UN promised to do an investigation in the region. We've seen also a number of countries sending individuals to assess the situation, to the severity of the situation. However, this is not enough. We need more assistance to the communities there, and especially women and girls who are subjected to rape and sexual violence. They will need a lot of assistance that goes beyond just food and nutrition. They will need assistance to deal with the physical and mental consequences of this rape and sexual violence that they were subjected to.
Evelina, thank you so much for covering this difficult topic for us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Natasha.
ትግርኛ ተናጋሪ የሆኑትን አባላት
አዲስ አበባ ከተማ ላይ የቲፒኤልኤፍ ሰዎች አሉ። የቲፒኤልኤፍ ሰዎች ስለ የቲፒኤልኤፍ አባል አይደለም። የቲፒኤልኤፍ ነፍሰ ገዳዮች ሊኖሩ ይችላሉ። የቲፒኤልኤፍ ሰዎች በተለያየ መንገድ በአደባባይ ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ያለውን ነገር ከህወሓት ጋር አቋማቸውን አስማምተው በዚያም ሁከት ለመፍጠር የሚፈልጉ ሰዎች እንዳሉ በግልጽ ይታወቃል። እነዚህ ሰዎች ማስረጃ ባይገኝባቸው እንኳን ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ እየደማን እየሞትን መቀጠል የለብንም። ስለዚህ በመንግስት በኩል እነዚህ ሰዎች ወይ ካምፕ ውስጥ ይሁን ወይ ማጎሪያ ውስጥ ይሁን ማስቀመጥም አለበት ብዬ ነው የማምነው። መንግስት በዚህ ጉዳይ ላይ ቆራጥ እርምጃ መውሰድ አለበት ብዬ ነው የማምነው።
you.